Tu Kazimierz, jesteśmy na konferencji Mars Society w Kalifornii. Miejscowość Irvine. I w tej chwili jest mowa końcowa prezydenta. Robert na zakończenie tej konferencji. Czwartek, piątek, sobota, niedziela, 4-dniowej konferencji, właściwie 5 dni.
Of course, the Viking missions were extremely successful, but then we had a 20-year hiatus and one failed mission in the middle. But then with the new era of Mars exploration, starting with Pathfinder and Mars Global Surveyor, we had 2 failures, but we were prepared to push right through them, and we did with Mars Odyssey, Spirit, Opportunity, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, Phoenix, Curiosity, Maven, now Insight is on deck, and then Mars 2020. Now, it should be said, by the way, and this is important, I forgot to mention this last night, that after Curiosity succeeded, there was an attempt by some in the administration to basically scale down the Mars exploration program on the basis that it had been successful. And in fact, there were no Mars missions planned for after Maven. Maven was already on the books at that time. But they were basically going to turn it off. And we raised a ruckus together with the Planetary Society, and they threw in Insight into the middle of it and planned a 2020 rover and so forth in order to repair this. There is some danger right now of falling off into a similar discontinuity. So we're going to have to mobilize on that to make sure that this epic, successful Mars exploration program continues and doesn't get canceled because it has been successful or because whatever. If Mars 2020 rover is going to collect samples, well, we need to send the vehicle there to take those samples and send them back to Earth. And I think the way Jeff Landis proposed doing it would be the best possible way to do it, especially if it's done with direct return. It will show the technology for making fuel on Mars at the same time. But that requires having the vision that we're doing this in order to prepare the way for human exploration of Mars. Okay. Now, that idea, I mean, one success that we've had over time is this acceptance by NASA that, yes, they are on a journey to Mars, that humans to Mars is their horizon goal. But it needs to be concretized from a vision into a program. All right? Because otherwise it's just sort of sizzle without steak. And so that's what we're going to have to do, or try to do. We have an opportunity. Chaos is an opportunity. We do not have a well-defined NASA human exploration program right now. In fact, we don't have, we have a budget for a human exploration program, but we don't have the program. And we're going to need to help shape it. So we're going to be gearing up our political efforts. We want to have local chapters, and if you're not a member of a chapter, you can do this yourself. You call up the local congressional office and say, look, I am a constituent of Congressman so-and-so. I would like to talk to him about where our space program is going. And the thing about the space program you should know is that it's not an excessively partisan issue. That it's not like abortion or gun control where the politician is on this side or that side and he knows that if he speaks to these people, they'll be his friends, and if it's these people, they'll hate him. And therefore, he'll only want to speak to this group and never want to speak to that group because it's completely pointless. Rather, space is something that they're all willing to do. It's not their highest priority, but you can get yourself into the schedule. If you're persistent to this, polite, but persistent, you know, it's like, well, it looks like we have an opening at 3 o'clock on Friday. Come by the office then. Because the congressmen are in the district at least one day every couple of weeks, and some a lot more than that. Some of them never come to Washington. And you go do it. And if you're in a chapter, put out the word. Congressman so-and-so is willing to meet with us. Let's all meet at McDonald's across the street at 2:45, and go over there and talk to them. And talk to them, give them a copy of Case of Mars. Whatever, give them a single sheet that outlines what here's the basic problem. Okay, we have to have a mission for NASA. We have to have concrete goals. The goals should be humans to Mars in the relatively near term, within a decade, perhaps. The agency needs to be focused. We're not going to accomplish anything without a goal. So, but we're also going to be putting together our political outreach. We're going to be having, you'll be seeing bulletins where you're going to be invited to join a telecon, which hopefully will grow to thousands of people, in which we discuss the situation and give people political directions. What's the issue of the day? What should we be calling congressmen on, or trying to meet with them on, and so forth. And we'll also post some, one-pagers that you can give to a congressman that makes it simple as to what you're asking them to do, this kind of thing. So you can do it as a chapter, you can do it as an individual. Okay, we want to reform chapters where we don't have them. We used to have very good chapter structure. We had over 20 active American chapters operating as local organizations. I don't know how many we have now, but we're going to have to try to reform them much stronger if you have a local group that are operating just on their own. As I said, in a certain sense, the chaos in space policy right now presents an opportunity. I did meet with Bridenstine in his congressional office. He is open to our ideas. He has read the Case for One. But whether it's, okay, we're going to make the moon the definite objective, but if they do create a robust lunar transportation system, okay, we want to create it in a way that makes it the basis for sending large payloads to Mars, getting humans to Mars, and actually disciplining the thinking of the Human Mars program into a program whose purpose is to get humans to Mars, not to justify the development of a wide assortment of miscellaneous technologies. We saw this thing yesterday with the Boeing talk. They said, well, here's our plan. We're going to have the space station in lunar orbit that will allow us to operate a giant solar electric spaceship, and with the help of the space station in lunar orbit, we can have solar electric propulsion, and it will get us to Mars in only 400 days. We get to Mars in 180 days right now, without the solar electric spaceship or the space station in lunar orbit. So they're actually, by using the program as a justification for an assortment of other activities, actually crippling the program itself by forcing it to use these activities that are chosen on priorities. The way this thing needs to work is you say, here's the mission, what's the simplest and cheapest way of doing it? Okay, not, here's all these things we'd like to do, how can we design a mission that uses all of them? Okay, so we have to insist on that, and we're going to be mobilizing politically to do that. Okay, we're going to be continuing activities like this. As you can see, this is terrific. We're going to be trying to get people thinking about the answers to these questions. We are sponsoring, and the detailed rules will go out, a university engineering student design contest, design a lander that can land 10 tons on Mars. That is the minimum capability required to do human Mars missions. If you land 10 tons on Mars, you can land a reasonable size HAB, you can land a descent vehicle that can get people back to orbit. You can do the mission. And NASA's been saying this is the tall pole, we don't have this, that's why we're going to do a deep space tow booth. I think if your problem is that you don't have a heavy lander, the answer for it is to develop a heavy lander. So, the young engineers in the world demonstrate their talent. As you can see in another context, they've got lots of talent, okay, to show NASA a variety of answers for how we can get this thing done. And we're also going to invite students of all kinds to exercise their literary talent in making the case for the human exploration and settlement of Mars in the form of letters to world leaders, which we want them to actually send, as well as show us. And that's the Hackett Prize. We're going to do that again as well. So, yes, those that are engineers, those that can write. Everyone can do something. And that's the whole thing. I mean, what we try to do in the Mars Society, what distinguishes us from, for instance, various other space societies, like the Planetary Society, the National Space Society, and so forth, is that what we try to do is mobilize the talents of our members. That's the idea. We're not just asking people to just donate, buy our magazine, this and that. We're asking people to do what they can. People have all kinds of talents in all kinds of areas. And, I mean, this was the inspiration. We could put this tremendous spectrum of talent to work. We could make human Mars reality. And that's our goal. I mean, now look, you know, we're going to win. We are. Okay, it's going to take time. Nothing hard, nothing worthwhile is ever easy. Okay. But, you know, this is necessary. I mean, it's quite clear. There's two visions of the human future that are around right now. One is, if you will, the Star Trek future, in which humans do go into space and we expand, and there are new possibilities, and there's, oh, there'll always be problems, we will always create problems, but there's always answers, because human creativity can come up with any answer to any problem that we create or, frankly, encounter. And so it's an optimistic future, and it's a future fundamentally of friendship, because if human beings can expand the reach, can expand the array of resources available to humanity, if it is not limited, then every other person and every other nation is fundamentally your friend. Then it is not a bad thing if the Chinese or the Russians create a SpaceX, because we want to have greatly expanded reach into space. And if they're developing ISRU technologies, you know, then that will, frankly, turn materials on Mars into resources, or on Titan, or wherever. The more the merrier. So that is a future where it is the collective creativity of humanity, it collectively expands the prospects of humanity. The other version, though, where we do not go into space, that also is an archetype, and we see it in literature, we see it in film. Okay, it's there, we understand it. If we can't go, if we're confined to one planet, if we cannot create new resources beyond those that are currently apparent, then we're all competing for a shrinking piece of the pie. Then it's a bad thing for us that the Chinese are developing, because they're going to be using oil, and we need the oil, so let's have a war over the Middle East to see who gets the oil. Okay, but in fact, you know, if we're developing new forms of energy, then it's not about fighting for this thing that is there and which there's only so much of. Okay, we can make a bigger pie. So this is what, and you see, and it's not just about the future. It is about the future, but the way people think about the future affects the present decisively. Okay? The catastrophe of the 21st century was caused by people thinking there wasn't enough to go around. Okay? So, Germany needs living space. They hadn't run out of living space, but they thought they were going to run out of living space. So they got to go exterminate Eastern Europe to get living space. It was pure nonsense. Okay, Germany didn't need more living space. Germany today is smaller than it was in the Third Reich. It has a larger population and a vastly higher standard of living, not by stealing other people's land, but through developing technology and implementing technologies of people elsewhere, many of whom they wanted to exterminate. Okay, there was a book written in 1912. It was called Germany in the Next War by General von Bernhardi, one of the chief intellectuals of the German General Staff. And he was basically predicting a century of war for the scarce resources of the world. And Winston Churchill read this book, and said, these guys want a war. These guys absolutely believe war is necessary. It's going to be a war. And it's what happened. But this was all from a fictitious worldview, a worldview that there isn't enough to go around, that our prospects are limited, and let's fight to get our share of what there is, as opposed to let's work with others to greatly expand what there is. So the question is, as we look out into this, I can tell you, I know for a fact that there are people in various think tanks in Washington right now who are thinking, what can we do to stifle Chinese development, because we don't want them to develop because there's only so much to go around. And I can infer from that with pretty good certainty that there are people in Chinese think tanks right now that are thinking the same thing about us. Okay? That's the kind of thinking we need to get away from. Okay? And by making, see, it's not a question that we're going to bring back oil from Mars or something like that. Okay? It's a question of defeating the fiction that resources are finite. Okay? Ideas have consequences. And there's no worse idea, there's no more fatal idea, there's no more catastrophic idea that has ever been than there's only so much to go around, and so we got to get rid of those others. Okay? That's the worst idea. It's responsible for the catastrophes of the 20th century. We cannot allow it to be hegemonic and create a new century of much greater catastrophe, because we now have the capability to create much greater catastrophes. So that's the ultimate importance of what we do. What we do is not irrelevant to these things that you're seeing going on in the world. Say, why are you obsessed with going to Mars? Look what's happening over here. Look what's happening over there. And these various geopolitical games that are being played with catastrophic consequences to the local populations. Why are these games being played? It's being played because of that mentality, which we have to get away from. So this is the most important thing going on in the world today. Not merely because 500 years from now, when people look back at this time, they won't care which faction took power in Syria. They will care what we did to make their interstellar civilization possible. It's not just because of that. It's because if humanity is to realize that future, if we are not to have a century of war and catastrophe, this idea that these possibilities are there for us, and that all men can be brothers in a universe of infinite resources, okay? That's what we need to establish. That is the role. And you can argue it, you can point out the fact, it is a fact, that Malthus' theory did not come true. The world's population is 7 times as large when Malthus wrote. Standard of livings are much higher, okay? Much, much higher, okay? But yet, it does somehow seem self-evident to people that if we are confined to one world, there will only be so much to go around. A few years ago, the Club of Rome, they published this book in 1972 called Limits to Growth, in which they said that by the year 2000 we're going to run out of everything. And obviously it didn't come true. So they had a meeting a few years ago, somewhat after the prediction failed, when they said, well, some people say that we were wrong, but fundamentally we were right. Yes, we didn't run out of oil, we didn't run out of zinc, we didn't run out of tin, we didn't run out of copper, but fundamentally we have to be right because there is only so much to go around. Okay? And in other words, it's a false idea, but nevertheless it appears to have terrific force if you think of the human prospect as limited to one world. And so we have to show that it's not the human prospect. So, a few things. I don't know exactly where we're going to have the next conference next year. I think it will be on the West Coast, because I think this is, okay, where people are showing that it can be done rather than it can't. We'll see about that. But in any case, this is the task before us. It's a great task. It's a noble task. As I say, I think it's the most important work that anyone's doing right now. And so to conclude the conference, I'd like to invite Oscar Castellino to come back up.
Through the power of music, spread the message of Mars, our rise to Mars. we're going to play a YouTube video of the premiere of this anthem. That was the words written by Dr. Ron Gilbert and me, and I wrote the tune, and James Wellen orchestrated it. You'll see the orchestra playing. So I'll just sing the refrain for you and the end so that you know it when we're singing. Rise to Mars, men and women, dare to dream, dare to strive, build a home for our children, make this desert come alive. And it ends, come along all together for our future, rise to Mars. Right, so we can play the video. And sing along, everybody, that's what I'm saying. We get the words down there as well if you want to look at this.
Yeah, this is what I saw.
Rise to Mars, men and women, dare to dream, dare to strive, build a home for our children, make this desert come alive. There are challenges before our eyes that nature never knew, but the power of human enterprise shall take us through and through. Rise to Mars, men and women, dare to dream, dare to strive, build a home for our children, make this desert come alive. Come along, great nations, all together, all the spirits, bring an end to strife for our future. Rise beyond the skies, rise to Mars, men and women, dare to dream, dare to strive, build a home for our children, make this desert come alive. Come along, all together, for our future, rise to Mars.
Okay, rise to Mars. See you next year.
Great job.
To na razie tyle, kochamy, bye.